I am very honored to have Brian Balasia, CEO and co-founder of TalentEi. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics, the thing that so many people are concerned with, hiring. So, Brian, first, I think the way to start is just tell us what your company does, and then we'll, I want to learn a little about you, and then we're gonna see if we can help people in their hiring process.
Good. Yeah. So what we do is we help companies to hire better people faster at a better price, typically. And we do that by improving hiring accuracy, reducing candidate waste, and using data to drive continuous improvement in the hiring process.
Okay.
And the way we think about hiring is in, it's I think I mentioned to you last time we talked, it's a little bit like the Toyota production system, right? So there's a lot of waste in the system that I think people have missed. And a lot of companies say, oh, there's just not enough good candidates in the marketplace. And oftentimes when we go and analyze those companies, we find that there in fact are a lot of applicants that they're seeing, but that they're wasting a lot of their supply, right? And that comes in a number of different kind of reoccurring themes in terms of types of waste, right? So we see a lot of times like in manufacturing, we'll see what we call queuing waste. So we'll see a firm say, we're going to hire 100 people and maybe they have 200 people apply. And so those kind of, as they apply, they make a judgment. Oh, this seems like a warm body who will show up on time. So I'll hire this guy and I'll put him on shift A. And this guy seems all right. And I got an opening on shift B. I put him on shift B. And what happens is they get mediocre talent and they put them in different spots, oftentimes without really asking the candidate where they might fit within the organization, but just kind of what the company needs as they see the candidates. What happens is a lot of times our best candidates for specific shifts or for specific pieces of equipment we miss, because by the time we get to that person, we've already filled the jobs, right? Or it's taken us so long to get through the line that we've missed them and they've gone somewhere else. We see kind of queuing waste that we're always looking to address. Sometimes we see it like at bigger companies, we'll see what we call siloing waste, where maybe we have 50 job openings in a particular skill set across an organization, and each job has 20 applicants applying to it, right? So each hiring manager hopes that their dream candidate is one of 20 people who have applied to their particular opening. But across the 50, we've really got 1,000 candidates we could be considering. And a much higher probability that our dream candidate is one of 1,000, right? Maybe my dream candidate is is like in your pool, your dream candidate is in my pool, or maybe both of them are in your pool. And so oftentimes what happens is that we have the candidates, they were within our reach and we just missed them, right? We also see things like timing issues, where maybe a candidate applies too late as we're just about to close out a shift or a role, and then because we're not really looking at those candidates broadly, we're just considering for one particular opening, we might miss them. Maybe there's an opening today that I filled. Somebody applies this afternoon, they would be a great fit, and I don't even consider them for the opening that comes available next Tuesday. And then the last type of waste we're always looking at is bias, right? And so a lot of times people think about bias from a social ill standpoint. And certainly that is the case, but in our world, we look at bias as a missed opportunity, right? More candidate waste. So I have a great candidate, but for some reason I have excluded them because I have some preconceived notion of what a great candidate would be for my shop, right? So we have a customer who talks about how they only hire people with manufacturing background because they're a manufacturer, right? And then what they've done is they've missed out on a huge pool of candidates who keep applying to these jobs. Because they have that bias that they only want to hire somebody from manufacturing and they don't consider somebody from a different background. And what's happened there is they haven't really taken the time to understand the nature of the work that they're really trying to fill. We're using this kind of broad brush to just say, this is a manufacturing job, so people with a manufacturing background are great for it. And in the process, again, waste tremendous, a tremendous supply of viable candidates.
So have you advised this guy, and are you trying to help him change his
We are. So for this particular customer, we see that the type of manufacturing that they do is really fast paced, right? And it's very fast paced. It's very physically demanding, and the orders change continuously, right? So it's not the kind of manufacturing where you do the same task over and over again. So when we think about the type of manufacturing, it's fast paced, it's physically demanding at this plant. And then every order that comes by, the what has to be assembled changes, right? So same product, but lots of different features. I think there's like something like 6,000 possible combinations. So you got to read the order and then decide which part you're applying to the product on your station of line. And so what we were showing them is that some people who had a manufacturing background did not expect the work to look like that, right? Because in their mind, manufacturing may have been sitting on a stool pushing a button. It may have been physically demanding, but the same task over and over again. It might not have been physically demanding, but the same task over and over again, right? So it was the components of the work that were important. And they had said, well, we did an analysis and, we didn't have any success, particularly from fast food, or we didn't have any success from all these different industries. And we said, well, hold on. It's not a particular industry, right? So if I were a fast food worker working a drive-through line, right? I just turned 18. I'm used to having to quickly fill orders, right? I've got in a drive-through, you typically have about an 18 to 25 second tack time, right? So that is in line with, this type of manufacturing. And also the orders that pop up are different every time. So I have to assemble different things. I said, the difference there is that the work is not physically demanding. You're on your feet, but it's not, not putting the shoulders into it, or you're kind of really a lot of, wrist or grip strength. But I said, but if we understand the components of the work, we can have a far better understanding of not only who might be able to accomplish the job we have at hand, but also who might like that kind of work, right? That's why we see high turnover.
Very interesting. Are you familiar with the book Range?
I am not familiar with that book.
I'm trying to think. I can't remember who it's by. It's a book about, and the same guy who wrote this book wrote a book called The Sports Gene, which is, it's all about how people often go from one job to another, and by being in one job, it really helps them excel at a different job, because they come in with slightly different background, slightly well-rounded, but it's just like what you said, they have reflexes or something from one job, and it makes them cross-train. Same thing with sports. Like, you have these Olympians that they were doing like a summer game, and then they wanted to be in the Olympics, and they went to a winter Olympic sport, and they used what they knew from one thing. To me, it sounds a lot like that.
Yeah, I mean, it has been.
You're really, almost a victim if you come in thinking you know too much, then you can.
Yeah, I mean, we use these job descriptions to describe the work, and it's part selling, and oftentimes we don't do a good job of capturing the essence of the work, right? Like, we're not, we say it's a manufacturing job. We need, we're it's an exciting company, and it's a stable company, or it's a high growth company, or there's lots of opportunities for growth and development, but we miss some of the key parts of, like, what is the work, right? I think of like this one particular job that I'm referencing here in terms of this manufacturing. It's physically demanding and mentally taxing. And I think about my 18-year-old self, who was playing high school football. And I think, oh my God, I had a job at a factory between high school and college where I was a janitor, right? And I couldn't imagine a worse fit because I have a germ phobia, but I was a janitor, right? Because it was the only thing that they had. It was the only thing that they had available for that summer. And I was supposed to be a test driver, but my high school got out too late, so I couldn't be a test driver. So I was a janitor, and I made good money, but I wasn't the right fit for that job, right? And then I think about this other company that I'm referencing here, and this work is physically demanding, mentally taxing. And I think, God, if I was between high school and college, this would have been amazing. Like, when I was back in my prime, when I was like in good shape, I would have really enjoyed this, right? I had a job in the fall sometimes where I would help bale hay, and I thought, like, oh, that was so much fun. And I don't think the current version of me would think that was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of fun when, I was in high school. And it was because I enjoyed that kind of work. I liked the physical exertion. I liked the mental, kind of things that were mentally taxing while physically, requiring physical exertion. I think, that's why we end up with high turnover rates, right? We're oftentimes not, we're kind of dehumanizing the work, right? We're thinking about it from the company's perspective, but not the candidate's perspective. And the miss there is that you could say, I have this work to do, and if you want a job, you want you to do this, right? But there's tremendous cost in training, right? Like one of our clients, it takes them 120 hours to train up a person, right? And in the meantime, you're paying the trainer and the employee, right? The trainee, right? And so if you just say, I'm going to jam you into the spot where I need a person without any thought about what that person may or may not enjoy, you have a really high probability of an early separation, whether that's the person being terminated from apathy or not enjoying the work, or being a no-show, or them quitting of their own accord. And that is bad news for the company. That is expensive. That is tremendously expensive. And so we really help to think through not just what the company needs, but also what the candidate needs.
Very interesting. Okay. So the concept is great. I want a little bit better picture though of what's going on. How does this whole thing work? What are you guys selling?
So we have a SaaS-based platform. So it's a software platform that's hosted, and it's a little bit of software and a little bit of consulting. So we come in and we do two things. The first thing we do is when we think about a job, what we realized early on was that it was critical to understand, really, again, as we've talked about here, is what's the real nature of that work, right? So what is that job experience day to day? What are the expectations on a successful candidate day to day? And so the first thing we did is our mentality was to think about a job as an RFP, right? So like every job that goes out, what is it that you need accomplished? And so what we did is we built a system that dynamically profiles, it profiles jobs. It surveys hiring managers to ask them, what is it that you are looking for? What is it that you need in this particular role, right? So let's say it's a software developer role. We might say, well, I'm looking, historically we'd say, I'm looking for somebody with 5 years of Java development. And for us, that's nice. That gives us like a broad sense, but just knowing that you have that skill and you have that amount of experience doesn't really tell us who's the best fit for the job. We want to start asking questions. The hiring manager say, how much of this job is going to be focused on, doing bug fixes, doing, working with customers to find, to understand their requirements, doing budget and quality and speed trade-offs with customers. Are you going to be doing code reviews? Are you going to be designing new features, right? Tell us what the day-to-day experience and the need of that job is, right? Or in a manufacturing plant, sometimes we'll actually help the plant where we won't be surveying the individual hiring managers, but we'll look at the individual roles. So we'll have people come in and they'll say, what is it to work on a hopper line? And like, what is the day-to-day experience and expectation versus working on a quality assurance line or a conveyor line, right? Because they both might present as being, line worker jobs, but in reality, they're very, very different, right? One person's, reading instructions and putting in recipes together and lifting bags and mixing to consistency. And the other person is sitting on a stool, blurring their eyes as, maybe pie crusts are coming down the line to try to see if there's any defect that their brain picks up on. And so the first most critical piece of this is to truly understand the job. And again, so in kind of discrete hiring where you're hiring one-off, the system will survey the hiring manager dynamically to figure out exactly what it is you're looking for. So what we've done is
you'll go in and you'll just give me a few examples of questions you'd ask them.
Yeah. So how often, let's say a manufacturing job, let's say, is the successful candidate in this job, expected to learn things on their own and to be, kind of a self-starter? Or are they going to be receiving continuous coaching and instruction?
That is a really interesting question.
And that to us has been really important in some of these facilities where we've had issues where, in some facilities you are expected to learn on your own. right? And some people thrive in that environment. They want to be left alone. They want to learn on their own. In other environments, there's continuous coaching and mentoring and kind of oversight to ensure that we maintain quality. And to the right person, that is really helpful and encouraging. And to the wrong fit for that job, that can be grating and irritating, and on a plant floor could lead to fisticuffs, right? So it's those are the kinds of things that we're really looking at, is what is the experience of the job, right?
What do you do though if, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so what do you do? Maybe it's just not your place, but say you get a supervisor who's a total micromanager, who has a total ego, and they're going to make life living hell for everybody. You basically just have to go with whomever it is, and then just kind of only recommend candidates that you think are real resilient against some people like that.
That's a good question. So a couple of things that we do. So that's the kind of the top of the show we talked about, just reduce candidate waste, improve hiring accuracy, and then use data to drive continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. And that's the stuff we see in the data. So if we see, a shorter tenure within a certain supervisor, or what we'll oftentimes is we'll take and we'll break candidates into two buckets, a good bucket and a bad bucket, right? So if Noah and Robert and Sue and Karen and Bob all made it to their 90-day mark, and Brian and Joe and Ellen did not, we'll kind of break those two apart, right? And we'll say, okay, what are the differences, if any, between these two candidate groups? And maybe we'll find that it's the supervisor, or maybe we'll find it's the supervisor and a particular characteristic that we were seeing in these profiles. So we can then say, okay, well, if Ralph is hiring, then we are going to weight certain conditions because they end up resulting in greater success. And it might seem like a overly analytical approach to hiring, but these are big dollars, right? This is one of the most important pieces of a business, is to get the right people in the right spots and to reduce turnover, because it's costly to quality. It's
absolutely,
it prevents us from output. And so we really spend a lot of time in the data looking to say, what are those variances? Where, why is it that this group isn't lasting as long as we would expect, right? And so another good example of this is that we look at commute times, right? And we say, okay, what are the way we kind of think of this is when we're lining up candidates for a particular opening, think of this kind of like the NFL draft, right? Mm-hmm. So what we do is we put them in draft order, and we say, okay, so we had 300 applicants who applied. We're going to profile and score them. And so we have a pool of candidates that we're continuously maintaining, and we want to be proactive. So before I need to hire, I maintain this pool of candidates, so that if I show up to Noah in a Manning meeting and Noah says, I need 7 people on shift 1, the system kicks out and says, okay, of the people we've profiled, here are the best fits for you for shift 1, right? And the way that we do that is organizing these candidates by alignment to shifts or to roles. And it's a probability game. What we say is, it's not to say you won't occasionally get a Ryan Leaf in round 1, right? You can sometimes have a person who's just not a great fit, but more often than not, your top, your kind of first round picks are going to work out. And it's not to say that you couldn't get a Tom Brady in round 6, but again, more often than not, you are not going to get a Tom Brady in round 6, right? And you'd never trade your first round picks for 6th round picks, right? And so that's the way we think about this, is to say, how can I increase the probability that the people we hire are going to be here for a long time and going to be productive and successful. And so again, we profile the job, and then we profile the candidates as they come through. And as soon as we know what it is you need on a day-to-day basis or on a weekly basis, the system is kicking that out to you to say, of all the people that are currently active and profiled, here's who have the highest probability of success. And then we're continuously tracking that to say, okay, where do we need to tune that? Okay. So that we're not thinking of this as one big kind of massive humanity. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so you've questioned the supervisor, and now you're going to get the data on the applicants. So how does that work? The whole
So
process
when an
of it?
so we're a back office support for the company. So when a candidate applies, whether it's through Indeed or Craigslist or whatever source, the company's own website, we tie into the company, where we then get the candidates. So we'll get their application or their resume, whatever that kind of application happens to look like for the company. And we always get first name, last name, email address, and typically cell phone number, right? And so then let's say, so Noah applies, and we send a text and we say, great, great, great news, Noah. We've reviewed your application. We're interested in learning more. We have a couple additional questions to figure out where you might fit within our company, right? Click here. So you click on that, and it takes you through a wizard where we say based on the job, right? So if it's a manufacturing, kind of production line job, it might, have a certain set of questions. If it's a software developer job or mechanical engineering job, we have a whole different set of questions, right? We have 1,500 jobs and 55,000 characteristics in the system that can define those jobs. So you're going to get, let's say you have a production line job. We're going to say, okay, we'll run through a handful of questions. Say, okay, do you like coach? Do you like being coached and trained and mentored? Do you like just doing things on your own? We build that profile of you. And then the second that profile is complete, behind the scenes, we're scoring it against all the pieces of equipment, all of the shifts that we have. And oftentimes for our clients have a lot of times have multiple divisions, or they'll have multiple plants within a region. And so we'll then score you not just against the job or the plant you applied to, but if it's within a reasonable radius, like let's say, because as we're profiling you, we'll say, what's your, Noah, what are you comfortable commuting? Kind of use, I'm open to a 25-minute commute.
Yeah, that's a really important question, because
Yeah.
you might have a great fit, and then it just doesn't work out in that way, or everybody wants to work remotely nowadays. And
yeah. And so we figure that we get a sense of where you're willing to work, and then we'll also plot that to say, okay, okay, if Noah's willing to work remotely, I can score him against all the remote jobs in the US, right? If Noah is only willing to work within a 15-mile commute of his house, and he takes a car, well, then he's available to work at these two locations. If Noah is willing to take an hour-long commute and he takes mass transit, these other locations light up as possibilities. So what we're doing is we're then scoring you against every piece of equipment, every shift, every location that is within those bounds to then figure out where you fit.
Let me understand then. So they're applying for the job on the company's website, but this is going to go into basically your headhunting database and be used for more than just this one company.
No, we set up private systems for companies. So this is only used for that particular company. But it might be if there's a holding company that says maybe they own a bunch of tool and die shops and a bunch of assembly plants, then we could be scored against all of those within the holdco. But yeah, we're just processing applicants on behalf of our clients. And again, what's happening here is when you answer the profile, not only are we thinking about where you fit with the company's needs, but simultaneously where the job, or kind of how the job aligns with your own needs, right? So a good example of this is that we had a person, I was looking at the data with one of my analysts the other day, who they had applied and they were a good fit for the company, but they were a poor fit. The company was a poor fit for the candidate, right? In terms of this role, right? So the candidate really liked, I'm trying to remember the exact characteristics, but I think they really liked physically demanding work that was that had a really short tack time. And so they were willing to do more than the company needed, but the company needed somebody to do a pretty kind of very slow moving, monotonous job. So they overruled the recommendation in the system and said, well, I'm just going to hire them anyway, because they can do, Noah can do what I need to have done. You know what? He's like, gosh, he's a go-getter. He could do this, right? And 48 hours later, the person had quit. And of course they had quit. This is boring. This is uninteresting to them, right? And for the right person, it's great work. But for the wrong fit, they're going to quit. And so we look at this not only in terms of what the company needs, but also what the candidate needs, because again, there is no value to the company in putting somebody in a spot where they are miserable. You are just going to drive turnover and at best mediocre productivity.
What if, what we were talking about before was, you said, if people like what they do, they will do it well. I've pondered this, and there's definitely something to it, but this is usually the case? This is what you found?
This is what we found today, right? And it can be components of a job.
It doesn't have
Right,
to be
so-
somebody's calling.
Yeah. So like, for instance, there are people who love being garbage men and women, right? Just being, just picking up the garbage, right? I don't think that they love garbage. I think that's probably a low probability that they love garbage. But I do think that there are some advantages to being a garbage person, right? You are outside all day. You are not on call. You are not working, extra weekends and overtime. You have a very, kind of a structured schedule. When you complete your task, you are done. The faster you do the task, the faster your day ends, right? You're paid well. Like, there's a whole lot of benefits to this that for the right person, you work, fairly independently in some cases, in a team in other cases, but a lot of times like independently. So you can have headphones on and be listening to something, right? For the right, like those are a lot of perks to a job.
Yes.
Nobody bothers you. You could listen to a book on tape. You're outside and like, yeah, maybe garbage smells, but it doesn't bother you that much. It's like, again,
or maybe you don't have a sense of smell.
Yeah. It's like, is that your passion? No, probably not. But there are benefits to that job that you enjoy. And if you find the right person who cares about those things, again, higher probability that they stay there, because it kind of overrides some of those other factors that maybe you and I wouldn't like. Right. But that's because the components of this align with what we're looking for. Right. It's like, so I think that's been our hypothesis and approach. And it's turned out to be, again, this is not about a crystal ball where I say, for sure, Noah is going to be the best employee I've ever had. What we say is high probability Noah is going to be here over the next 6 months, right? High probability is going to be a strong performer. Doesn't mean 100% of the people in that bucket are going to be 100% performers. What we do is we band these. So we say, okay, like if you're a 96% alignment to the job, maybe the turnover rate over a 6-month period of time is, 1.5%. If you're an 85%, to 90%, maybe the turnover rate is 10%, right? So we start to band these things to say, what are the risks? And there's no 100% guarantee. It's just about being as predictive as we can be. And again, it's about, if I get somebody who doesn't like being outside and is a chatty Cathy because they love talking to their next door neighbor, I don't know that this job as a garbage person is going to work out. It's just not the nature of the work. And we can argue, and we frequently do, to say, well, if I pay you enough money, you'll keep the job. And it's like, how many people do we know that have been paid well and quit jobs that they ultimately disliked?
Yeah. So mainly you're going for like well enough and fit. You're not trying to give people necessarily jobs that like are their purpose or calling.
Yeah, it's not necessarily your
That's
calling.
a little, I think everybody's craving purpose in what they do. Some jobs are easier to find purpose than others. Maybe some people don't care though. Maybe some people are just like, it's a good paycheck, etc.
Yeah, it's as best we can align on these components where we have, again, highest probability of long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
That's what matters for the company and for the candidate. And again, personal life changes, all those things you can't control. But the things that you can control, make sure that you've got as tightly aligned a candidate pool, to the needs of the job as possible.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No.
I was gonna say, like, I mean, that's like, we think about shift this way. A lot of times you'll hear people say, like, you got to do any shift, and it's like, well, I don't know how many people's lives really truly allow them to do any shift, right?
So of course not.
You and I have talked about this a little bit. It's like, well, I want to win the job. you know, a lot of times what we'll see is that in a face-to-face interview or in an application where there's a binary, you know, true, false, yes, no answer, you know, oh, Noah, can you do any of these 3 shifts? And I was like, well, if that question's on the application, I'm going to say yes, because if I say no, I probably don't get the job, right? It's like we see this a lot. We'll see a lot of binary questions. We had a company that had a driving job, and they'd say, have you had more than 2 speeding tickets in the last 2 years? And every single person, whether or not they had more than 2 speeding tickets, said no, because they were smart enough to know that if I say yes, this thing's getting thrown in the garbage.
Right.
So if I say no, maybe it works out and nobody checks, or, you know, and so in the same way, can you do every shift? Yes, I can do every shift. And instead we say, well, let's ask that a little bit differently. If we had 6 shifts and we were going to change which shifts you were on a regular basis, which of these shifts could you do and at which frequency? So you'd say, well, I could often do night shift. Rarely could I do day shift. I got kids in middle school. I can't do that. I can't drop them off and pick them up. Right. I mean, if you needed to and you called me up, maybe I could do it.
So you frame it in a way where you're going to get a more honest answer out of people. Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. What's your opinion of in-person interviews?
I think it's a mixed bag. So I think that in-person interviews can be productive if you have a really well-defined framework of how you are going to ask questions and what specifically you are looking to get an understanding of, right? So kind of along the lines of the questions that we ask, right? Like if I want to know just if we jive, I don't know that I have to be best friends with everybody I work with if we just are agreeing that we work together to get a certain job accomplished, right? I mean, in some cases, you know, if we're both creative directors on a project, maybe that matters, like that we like to go, you know, eat at the same places and have the same kinds of drinks, maybe. But I think it's really important that you don't accidentally backslide into your, you know, kind of preconceived biases. And again, I'm not talking about just racial and socioeconomic bias. I'm talking about, you know, our bias towards somebody who's quiet, right? And we're like, oh man, I'm outgoing and I'm loud. And like, I don't know. I interviewed Lily and she was so meek and quiet. You know, I don't know. It's like, well, I don't know. Does the job require you to be outspoken and really talkative? Because I don't, you know, a lot of times we make these judgments that may or may not have anything to do with performance in the job. And I think that, again, as long as what you're trying to get to is related to the actual experience and nature of the work and long-term success, then have at it. Yeah. Right. Like your ability to, let's say it's a sales job and your ability to think on the fly is really important. That's something we might not be able to flesh out in any easy way other than, you know, in a conversation to try to push on you to think on the fly. Then yes, by all means, I think that's a great model. But if I want to see if I like you and I think you passed the sniff test, and I haven't really understood myself, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about what is success here, I think you run a big risk of accidentally, you know, pruning somebody who otherwise would have been a great fit. Yeah,
I know, and it's so tempting to feel like it's important to meet somebody. I had mentioned to you about this Malcolm Gladwell book about talking to strangers before. You know, it's all about how people, when you meet somebody, you draw conclusions and they are often totally wrong. We think we're so smart. You know, they talk in the book about Neville Chamberlain being invited to Hitler's summer home or winter home. And afterward, he's like, you know, I can work with this guy. And you think because you've met somebody and you've had a good conversation,
you think you know everything about
that you can work with them. Or your NFL draft brings me to this other book I listened to. You know who Daryl Morey is? He's the GM of Philadelphia. He used to be in Houston. He's sort of like the Moneyball of basketball.
Yeah.
And he talked about interviewing candidates, interviewing, before the draft. And he said, there are so many big men who come in and they just tell you the most inspirational sob story about how they came up from nothing. And, he says it's so easy to be seduced by people. Yeah, we want to like them. Or one thing you told me while we were in conversation before, just to kind of skip around, you said that sometimes people will skip over somebody for an interview just because they couldn't pronounce their name.
Yeah. So
I know we're totally going to another subject.
So there's a couple of great researchers from the University of Chicago who have done this study now, I believe I think 2 or 3 times, where they've taken the same resume and the same exact resume, and they've just changed the name on the top to names that were perceived to be of different racial backgrounds or genders.
Unbelievable.
Right. And they find that Anglo-Saxon male names get the most interviews every time. Right. And we've seen that too. So we've played around a little bit with masking candidates. So what we'll do is we've done this a couple different ways. We've just provided resumes and masked the resumes to say, we can't see the candidate's name, or you can't see the candidate's name. How does that affect things? We've put them in rank order where you can or can't see the candidates' names before you make an interview decision. And you do see sometimes this bias appear. And what's really fascinating to us was the bias does not, when you see it in the data, you immediately have these concerns that the person on the other end might be a bigot, Mm-hmm. And oftentimes what's been interesting for us is that this type of bias has not been associated with as overt, kind of like a overt bigotry as we would think. A lot of times this became like a systemic, it's a transactional problem, right? So it's like, I've got 100 resumes to go through and they all look the same to me. And I got this one and the name on it I can't pronounce. And it doesn't look any better or worse than the other 100 resumes I have. But if I call this person, I have to have an awkward conversation because I don't know how to pronounce their name.
Unbelievable.
And so I'm lower probability of picking it. And we could see that we could increase the probability that you make the phone call by identifying and flagging that this person is a 5-star match to your job. Oh my gosh, no, this person is great. And then it forces you to say, am I not going to call them because of their name? They're my best match. They're my best candidate. The highest probability of long-term success is right here. And that's been fun to see how that plays out. And that really
sounds like Freakonomics, the whole thing about the names. Yeah.
Yeah. And it pushes on people. Like we've done lots of A/B testing where we had this one manufacturer and we turned off, we just worked with the CHRO and we masked the names of the companies you used to work for. And we masked the dates of employment. So instead of showing you that Noah worked for company A from June 2017 to May of 2020, right? We just said, oh, you worked there for 2 years, whatever, 6 months, whatever the time period is, right? And instead of telling you that you worked for, DT Energy, we said, oh, you work for, company A. And we told you the role. We said, oh, he was a production line supervisor for company A for 3 years, 6 months, right? And it blew us away that we would give you all this information. We'd say, oh, Noah likes this, he doesn't like this, and this is why he's a fit. And in some cases, people were so uncomfortable. They said, well, how do I know if he's any good? I don't even know who he used to work for. And I said, well, I don't really know how that's a factor. We know that he was this job for X number of years. He's got lots of experience. Well, what if he's been out of work for 3 months? that probably indicates he's lazy. And I was like, or he had a kid, or he moved, or he had a parent that was ill, or he did such a great job at his last job that he got a bonus and he decided to go travel. I was like, these preconceived notions that we have of what is a good or bad fit without the underlying data to support that assumption, right? And it's oftentimes transactional. We just say, I got a lot of people, they all look the same to me, so I need some mental framework that I can use to rule people in or out so I can make a decision, because
True. And
otherwise,
paradox of choice.
Yeah, what do I do? I got to make some decision,
And so your software will help narrow it down, and then also you will work hands-on, or people from your company will work hands-on and consult the company as well. So it's a double.
Yeah, and we do it all as one offering. So we just provide the software and then provide the consulting as part of that to ensure that this aligns with their needs. And we're continuously tweaking, right? So let's say that we have a couple of people who wash out, or a couple of people who are rock stars. We'll go back in as we look at that data and say, okay, what is it about Noah and Robert that guys, to the supervisor, you just think is spectacular? Is there something else we could add to the questions on the front end to help us hone in on more Noah and Roberts? Or, oh my gosh, Ellen and Randy, they were a disaster. So is there something like, what made them a disaster? It's like, I don't know what it is, but we figure that question out. We say, okay, let's put that in and let's see how the data shakes out. Let's continue to tune this, because at the end of the day, we want to reduce turnover. We want to speed this process up, and we want to become more proactive, right? So if we can just maintain a candidate pool where we can, on a rolling basis, we can optimize, right? And I think, I talked about this briefly. It's like, we all think that the lottery is a high risk game, right? The probability that you're going to win the mega millions is very low, right? And that's, I think, if I remember, it's like Mega Millions, they draw out 6 numbers, I think, and have maybe 100 balls, and the odds of you winning are 1 in 300 million or something like that, right? And if you take a company where, say, maybe you have a manufacturing plant, they have 450 applicants and 6 job openings, right? The different number of combinations that you can apply those people in, so you can fill 450 people into 11 trillion possible combinations. That is a
trillion. If they all applied, if they all said, "Oh, I'll take all 6," any of the 6.
Let's just say we had 6 openings on 6 different shifts, or we had 1 shift and 6 different pieces of equipment, and they were all production line assistants, right? And we say, oh, I got 450 people I could put in my factory. Well, great. Which of those 450 people do you fill? We think it's an easy problem to solve. It's really complex. And again, that's the thing that we can do a better job with computers. We have to spend time really with people analyzing the nature of the work and the people, and really understand what should go into those inputs for the computer. But at the end of the day, the computer can run that and say, okay, if I want to optimize and figure out the best probability, yes, Noah could go on job A or job D, but Brian only can go on job D. So therefore put Noah on job A, right? That kind of horse trading is impossible for the human brain to do at those numbers.
And your software can do that.
Yeah, and that's what computers are good at. Computers are good at large scale computations, right? And so that's where it's been fun to kind of play with this. It's kind of the best of both worlds. It's in an odd way, you're using a computer and data to humanize the work, right? So you're saying, look, we really have to care about the person and what they're going to be doing. And the best way we can do that is to use this information to ensure that we get the right person in the right seat for both them and for the company.
Fascinating. Okay, so for companies, people listening to this, watching this, they're machining companies often. So people who aren't using your software system yet, do you have any advice for them for their hiring process?
Yeah, I think my best advice is to really think about the nature of the work, and not in the trappings of a job description, but like, what is it again about this job? Like, what are the expectations? What are the characteristics of the work from a physicality perspective, from a mentality, from a timing, mobility, interaction with other people. Like once you really understand that and think about that, and you are then able to build a better framework in your mind for what an ideal candidate looks like for that job, and you're going to increase your hit rate. And again, it's not about perfection; it's about increasing probabilities for both parties. And I think it's to take a beat. It's just to take a pause and to say, like, just to dissect that, and instead of it being some flowery job description, I think those things matter, but they matter like an advertisement, right? They matter in getting people to apply.
Yes.
But I think more important than that is that honesty about what is the nature of the work, right? It's like, I'm sure we could look at a garbage person job description. It might be very flowery, but it's like, at the end of the day, like if you can identify and hit on those characteristics that are really, that are unique to the job, but are a value to somebody in the job, or maybe even a detractor to the job, you're
right.
putting
Under
those things out.
promise.
Yeah, putting those things out front is going to help you, because like if I apply to a job, and you've got to think about from the applicant's perspective, right? So many times we've been into factories, or we've been into environments where somebody says, yeah, I want to be a software developer at company A. And in their mind, they think they know what that is, right? The company knows what that looks like on a daily basis, right? Like I would take this, I studied aerospace engineering, right? And in my mind, when I was a high schooler going into aerospace engineering, I thought, I want to design airplanes, right? And then I actually went and shadowed people who were aerospace engineers. Like nobody at that place is designing an airplane, right? Not in the way that I envisioned as a kid, with some vellum and a pencil, and I'm designing
Howard Hughes and
Howard Hughes is probably the last and only person. There's a couple other people who've done it that way, but most people are, they're like working on a bolt, or they're working on a piece, and so my vision of what it would be like to work at a Boeing or a company of that sort, and what the day-to-day experiences are very different. And if we allow both parties to, or make an arrangement for a deal, and both parties are not on the same page, it is bad for both parties. And what oftentimes we'll do is we'll put out a job description and we'll say, oh yeah, it's a manufacturing job. We're going to get people who know manufacturing. It's like, wait, there's lots of types of manufacturing.
Sure.
Working in a tool and die shop could be slow paced, but like every part is different, right? It could be, that's a type of manufacturing. It could be a type of manufacturing where you have a really fast, 20-second tack time, and every tool is, assisted, right? So that there's ergonomic assistance. Like that's a type of job. And those are not the same job. They're not the same job. They're not for the same person. They're barely related to each other, other than like the output is that you have assembled something, or you've created something. And so again, my advice would be to spend a little bit more time. And if you are going to write a job description, the more forward you can be with some of that stuff, or at least even if you don't put it in the job description, so people aren't aiming at it, at least in your interviews or your selection process, whatever you're doing, to do a better job of having that framework. And if you have that framework, you will inherently improve your hit rate.
Very good. Very good. How are you doing on time? You have to go.
I'm okay. I'm as good as I'm good with whatever time works for you.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I have a couple other questions. So, as we started with, everybody's preoccupied with finding good people right now, and manufacturers. Well, everybody. It seems like there's a shortage of people right now. Is there anything you guys are doing about that? Is this shortage for real? What is your take on our shortage of skilled people for all across the board?
Yeah, so you're at the Federal Reserve. They'd say that there's an impending shortage for sure. In our client base, we've seen it as more waste than that there's a shortage, right?
And your client base is mainly manufacturing, or it's all across the board?
It's across the board. And so it's a lot of candidate waste, right? So it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if you're a CEO standing out there saying there's not enough, software developers in Chicago. We need more software developers. And it's like we look at that and say, well, you had 4,000 apply to your jobs last month, but nobody saw all 4,000, right? They saw, 30 because they had, everybody's job. It was so siloed, right? Or you'd say, well, I just am not getting enough candidates in my plant. I need more candidates applying to my plant. And sometimes it's the case. Like sometimes we will see a rural plant that it's just, there's just not a population in the area.
Yeah.
But oftentimes, kind of more often than not, we'll see that they have the candidate access. They're just burning that pool, right? So it's like, we saw a candidate apply to a customer and we were on site observing, and they had they had a hiring event. They had 70 people show up to the hiring event, and we were talking to one of the executives, and they started this presentation. They said, here at Company X, we're doing, X, Y, and Z, and this is what we hope you would come do with us on these shifts. And this woman got up and she just left, right? And chased her down. I was like, we were like 10 seconds into this presentation, like what? Just curious as to what it is that offended you. And she said, oh, I have 12 years of tenure in a union shop. And she's like, but my kids are in middle school and I desperately need first shift. And the place I'm at, even having 12 years, I can't move to first shift. I don't have enough seniority. She's like, I was hoping for a first shift job. And I had all the data and I knew that there were no first shift jobs available that week for the hiring event, but that there was a high probability that a week later we were going to have 4 or 5 openings, right? And so again, we lose her because she leaves because there's no first shift that week. And then a week later, we're going to be sitting in a room and someone's going to say, God, there's just not enough people applying for these jobs, right? And it's like, oh, just 2 ships passing in the night. And I feel like that is too frequently the case where we have access to these candidates, but for one of these reasons, we miss them. And so again, it's not to say that, like, again, the workforce is growing by, like they said, over the next 10 years, 0.2% a year, and the demand is growing by like 5%. So there's certainly going to be increased competition and stress on the market, but most the average company cannot deal with the macroeconomics. What they can deal with is winning the war for talent that they have access to. So if you see those people, you have to get the right people in the right seat as quickly as possible. That's the part that you can control.
And is money the best way to get the right people in the seat, or is I think money would be something maybe just off the bat to make people interested, but maybe not the way to retain people.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the data on all sides, right? So again, certainly, the more you offer, the more candidate interest you have out of the gate. But to your point, if it's misaligned, it's misaligned. An extra 25 cents an hour, I might hang out for a while, and then I'm hopping, right? So it's like if I like my job and I like where I'm at and it fits my life and it fits the kind of work I like, and it's like, yeah, but you could go do this other thing that you think is miserable for an extra 25 cents an hour. I'm not saying that you wouldn't do it. Your life circumstances may require that you do it. But again, lower probability.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't see it as just a complete arms race for the most amount of cash. It's about right people, right seats, right? I mean, we all work with people who could make more money somewhere else, but it's not a constant clawing for the next, small amount of money. If you're satisfied.
Do you see certain candidates? I mean, one thing if people aren't a good match, you'll tell them. Do you see some people and your software identifies them as, well, this is an entrepreneur. This person shouldn't work for anybody, or isn't a good fit to be an employee working for somebody? And do you tell those people?
So I don't know that we've ever looked at it. I don't think we've ever looked at it in that way. We've only looked at it as they align to a particular segment they've identified, right? So it's I don't know that we've not gone on the career counseling side, more on the from the company's perspective, who do they want to hire of this pool, not, from a candidate counseling perspective.
Have you considered that?
Yeah, we've talked to some companies about training materials. So like, hey, one of the things we looked at was, and we haven't done this to date, but we looked at this idea that we have the data. Like, let's say it's in a higher skill area, right? So I'd say, Noah, you really wanted a job at company M, and you are your best match across the 150 openings that they have right now is an 82% match. And if only you had these additional skills, or you had these experiences, you'd be a better fit, right? So at one point we had talked to a couple of online training programs to say, I wonder if at some point that's not interesting to say, like, gosh, no, if only you knew 3-axis CNC, like, gosh, you're a good fit, but like, if you just knew this one piece, and like, hey, you could learn that here, if that's helpful, just if we know, God, Noah, he can do the shifts. He's a great fit in all these other ways, but for this skill, then could you deliver training for that skill? So we've talked about it, but we haven't pursued it much beyond kind of early conversations with companies.
Fascinating. Do you have anything else to say to the people of the world?
I appreciate the time today, and I really appreciate the conversation.
It was a great conversation.
So,
and if somebody wants to find out more, they should just Google TalentEi.
Yeah, TalentEi.com, or you can email info@talentei.com. And I'm sure one of my team members would be happy to connect and see if we can help you. So
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, cut. So this likely will be coming out on Friday next week.
Okay.
So I'll just need a photograph from you, like a horizontal, high quality photo, something contextual is the best. But anyways, fantastic. I'm so glad we were able to finally hook up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's really good to talk to you.
Likewise, I really appreciate the time and the conversation. I think probably one of the best interviewers I've had the good fortune of talking to.
Oh, so, really? God.
Totally. No, I'm serious. Like real attentiveness, putting in additional information and like ideas and books and concepts that you have. It's not a.
Well, you just bring them up to me, like what you told. You got to check out this range.
I will. I've got it. I wrote it down.
Totally, like, brought to my mind. And then what was it? I mean, you've read Moneyball, right? Like,
I've read Moneyball.
Stuff.
I've read Moneyball, and then my entire executive team, but myself, had read Talking to Strangers. So,
oh really?
Like, oh, don't read it. They're like, don't read it. They're like, listen to it on tape.
You got to listen to it.
Okay.
And then there's a Michael Lewis book, which had the thing about Daryl Morey in it. It's about Daniel Kahneman and Tversky. The Undoing Project, I believe it's called. And that's all about why people are biased, and that's really fascinating. Do you know Daniel Kahneman?
I do not.
He's like Nobel Prize winner, wrote some book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which I haven't read, but yeah, I'm into all kinds of stuff like this. The other thing I was thinking of, I listened to this podcast. It's by the Freakonomics guy. It's called No Stupid Questions. And
I've listened to that a couple times.
Well, this week they were talking about how the new governor, or no, I think the new mayor of New York he was saying everybody he wanted to hire them based on emotional intelligence. And they were analyzing what the heck that meant, and
Yeah.
who is emotionally intelligent and is emotionally intelligent based on just what somebody says in their own
Yeah, what's
self-analysis.
the measure? Sounds like an IQ test, the EQ test.
That's what
sounds
they were
horrifying.
saying. It's like
Yeah, it's like,
that, but it's
like
like
IQ.
self-assess. Like they're,
Yeah. It's
are
like,
you like this? Are you like that?
I was like, like for a long time. So there's kind of two things that always terrify the hell out of me. One is artificial intelligence as it relates to this process, because you're just putting resumes and job descriptions into this blender, and they just bias out all of these people based on based on these small context clues of the way that, maybe a white middle-aged man writes versus a white middle-aged woman, or versus a black middle-aged woman, right? So it's just these like little context clues in the writing, and the AI engine says, "Oh, I want to find people that are just like they're like what we want to find, like more people who are like the people who have been successful here at Target." And you're like, "Well, most of the middle management at Target is white middle-aged men, so let's just use all these context clues." It's horrifying, right?
Yeah.
But along that line too, we see a lot of companies that'll say, "Oh, we use Myers-Briggs." The Myers-Briggs,
Yeah.
and Myers and Briggs were a mom and daughter who
Right.
created this as a parlor game. And, it's been debunked in tons of academic papers that people change their answers each time based on their mood. And it's not very predictive.
But there are
Yeah.
some other indexes that are supposed to be good, right?
Yeah. They all have their drawbacks. It's like, it's like the IQ test. And it's like the IQ test is different. And your success is based on your economic standing.
So you don't believe in any of those assessment tests?
I just think they're hard. I mean, within maybe you could assess within the same socioeconomic background, right? So it's like, it's like the problems with all standardized testing. It's like you almost have to do it by socioeconomic background, because like, you ask a question like, what is a this? And then it's like, well, I've never been sailing before. So the fact that I don't know a sailing term doesn't mean I'm dumb. It means I haven't been sailing before. It's like how are we evaluating, your intelligence? And I'd be curious to see what they do with EQ. So I'll have to listen to that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was pretty interesting. I love that show. They're just a bunch of nerds just sitting around talking about stuff like this.
I've spent a lot of time lately listening. I listened to Moth Radio Hour, and
I listen to Moth once in a while. I find them very well done, but often kind of dark.
Yeah. They have to be that's like This American, like This American Life. It oftentimes is dark.
I think This American Life back in the old ones was less dark.
Yeah.
I don't listen to it so much anymore.
I think it's dark. Yeah, and then what's the other one?
Radio Lab.
Yeah, Radio Lab. I love. There was an amazing Radio Lab the other day. Snap Judgment. Snap Judgment to me feels happier.
That's another NPR one.
Yeah, it's another NPR one.
I know. I've heard of it. I haven't tried it.
Yeah, I thought that This American Life used to be fun sometimes.
It used to be fun. Now it
used to be like. Yeah, my wife and I used to listen to it. Like we'd be like, oh, we were doing a road trip and we'd listen to it. And then like, I put it on the other day. We were in the car and I was like, we can't even listen to this with the kids in here. Like, this is like dark. It's like, it's like talks about the killing fields. And you're like, oh, I don't know, man. This is
same
so
with Radio Lab a lot. Radio Lab is kind of this and that, but I've I like stuff like you ever heard of Business Wars?
I have not.
Business Wars is cool. It's like they'll take, and this seems like something you might find interesting. They'll take two companies like Boeing versus Airbus, and they'll go through the history of the two companies, and they'll talk about like when one was doing this and one was doing this, and they're fighting one another. And it's just really well done. They'll use sort of like voices. It's almost like a play.
Okay. I'll listen to that. I was
the only one. Don't listen to the one that's Blockbuster versus Netflix. That's the very first one, and it's not very good. But
okay, fair.
Some of them are so compelling.
Fair enough. I got into a dark podcast I just finished the other day, which was I think it's called The Women Who Left. It
Women
came
Who
to
Left.
my, yeah. Oh my God. It's like, if you want just like, if you want like something dark, but like also fascinating. I think
Okay.
it's, I'm just going to double check that. It's
I'm gonna
called
look
The
up
Women Who-
that.
I think it's The Women Who Left. Well, I'm looking them up. Let's see, because I got my library.
What app do you use?
I was just using the podcast one on iPhone.
I think their podcast app sucks.
Yeah,
It's good. It's good
I'm
for
lazy.
finding stuff, but
Yeah. What is it? I'm just making sure I've got this.
tell you what I
Where
discovered.
is this?
There's an app called Air, AIRR, and
Okay.
you can make markers on the podcast, like you're listening to Audible, and like just mark a certain spot and write something, like if you heard something that you really want to like go back to.
Okay, that's awesome. So this, the mother or let me just
The
double
Women
check to
Who
make sure I
Left.
get-
I'm
I'm
totally
just making sure I got it right. It's called, so it's from The Turning. So it's The Turning, The Sisters Who Left.
The Turning.
It's
So
called
the name,
The Turning, The Sisters Who Left.
okay.
And so what it is, and it's not like, it's like, to me, it was fascinating because I went to Catholic school as a kid, and it is about the nuns who studied under Mother Teresa, who left her convent because it too closely mirrors a cult. And it was like, it was fascinating.
Are you
was
Catholic
like-
still?
I was raised Catholic, and I'm not really Catholic practicing. So my kids go to Catholic school, but that's primarily for the education for the area. But yeah, I grew up and I was in Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade. So I'd be like more non-denominational, not far more socially liberal than the Catholic Church would allow.
Sure.
So,
Oh, that sounds really interesting. I'll
it was
take
like,
a look
it
at
was,
that.
that one was fascinating. The other one is there was a radio lab the other day though, that I think you might really enjoy. Actually, I think it's an old radio lab, but it was about the guy who ultimately led, by pure accident, he led to the removal of lead from gasoline.
Really?
So yes, I'm gonna see if I can find it for you.
That sounds good.
Oh, so this was an awesome one. That was actually pretty, like, I don't know, it's pretty funny. So it's Radio Lab, age of the planet.
I'll look that up.
Well, I'm just gonna find it.
The old radio labs, like with Robert Krulwich and stuff, those were so good.
Yeah, so this is called Radio Lab. The title is Heavy Metal.
Heavy metal. Okay.
Okay, and so yeah, so what's amazing about this one is, I think you'll like this, is that this scientist doesn't really care about anything other than like the pursuit of knowledge. And I won't ruin it for you, but basically he just wants to know how old the earth is.
I think
That's
I
all he
have
cares
heard
about.
that. I think I have heard that. Yes, I have.
It's
I loved it.
amazing. I was like,
Loved it.
I was
Loved
like riveted. I was like, this is so great. This guy is just like he got all these awards because ultimately his work led to lead being removed from gas. And they can definitively say that IQ points in kids went up 5 points. Kindergartners are 5 IQ points. Everyone measure that based on previous
that was
smarter in 2000 than they were in 1981.
That was an
So it's like,
excellent one. I totally remember that.
Yeah, I loved that one. So
that one was fantastic. The other, I'm just going to recommend one more podcast and then I better go.
Yeah,
We could have like a podcast exchange.
yeah, I love this.
So there's another one that's kind of like Business Wars. It's called American Innovations, and they'll go to like an invention like the telephone. They'll trace it back to Alexander Graham Bell. Like they'll tell his whole story and like how it evolved and how he invented it or whatever, or they'll tell the story of the the person that invented the airplane, not the Wright brothers, but like,
Yeah.
Do you know who that was? What I'm talking about? I figured aerospace person, but yes, check that out.
Okay.
And
I will.
anyways, this was fantastic.
This is great.
Nice to talk to a podcast junkie.
Likewise. Well, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I'll shoot you a headshot or a picture.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.